Gentlemen, I would like to call the regular council meeting for Monday, May 27th to order. Firstly, the territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territories of Lekwungen-speaking people of the Kasepsum and Songhees nations, whose historical relationships to the land continue today. Approval of the agenda. May I have a mover and seconder? Well, first of all, I should point out 6.1 for anyone that's waiting for that tonight. The proponent has pulled it from the agenda. So 6.1, which is under the consent agenda, which is the rezoning application for 517 Latoria Road, has been pulled. And on that note, may I have a mover and seconder to receive the near and long-term agenda and the adoption of today's agenda as amended of this regular council meeting? Please, thank you, Olson and Grove, please. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, I'll move on. Mayor's message, I've got just 3 items. I just want to let the public know right now the Colwood Fire Department is recruiting for paid on-call firefighters. So I just want to make that announcement. I think you can go to the Colwood website, I believe, and the applications are there. Secondly, as some of you may know, the city's Summer Music in the Park series has begun. And it's taking place every weekend, all around Colwood, including public spaces like the Colwood Corners, that's new for this year, and Royal Bay Commons. So I would have came out on Saturday night, but it was too cold, and I'm a wimp when it comes to wet and cold weather. Okay, lastly, there will be a Go by Bike Week celebration station in Colwood near the new Galloping Goose Bridge, where we're proposing to put it on June the 7th, just to let everyone know, from 4 to 6 p.m. in partnership with Capital Bike. That's all I have. Are there any errors or omissions in any of the minutes attached to the agenda? Seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder for the adoption and receipt of the minutes in the recommendation? Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. Public participation. We had 7 written submissions received after the publication of the agenda and will be appended to the agenda tomorrow. In addition, we had 1 petition regarding 6.1, the rezoning application. Of the 7 written submissions, 7 were regarding 7.1, which is the VMP Hydro Works Re-Vegetation, and 1 item, 7.4, on Bill 44 and 47 bylaw amendments. And at this point in time, I would welcome members of the public to come up and present any concerns or ask questions. You'll be given 2 minutes, at which time you will see a green light, which means you can talk. And then there'll be an amber light and a red light. And then, well, we have to shut you off at that point in time. Alternately, you may wish to wait for the agenda item to be brought up and to speak at that time. Is there anyone that wants to wait until their item is brought up on the agenda? Seeing none, then I will welcome the first. I understand no one has registered to talk electronically, so I welcome members of the public to come on up and speak to us. So, if you could identify yourself and where you live, please. You have to push the button. Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm John Ferguson from 309 Seafield. Okay, I realise I'm probably about a month late and $1 short, but never mind. We have a number of questions about the Seafield development and the density changes. A lot of them to do with the fact that because we're small lot properties, the effect of something tall immediately due south of us, because we're 6 metres from the back fence, they're 10 metres from the back fence. And whilst they said that they were 18.5 metres between their buildings, they are not 18.5 metres from existing structures. They are 16 and due south. And it was really interesting to hear that the councils down at the beach talking about the Pacific blue frog a week or two ago when you actually slapped a building right where they live. And there was a very simple solution to this that would have made us happy, not put us in the dark for 6 months of the year, just move the building slightly further south. There's 24 acres, it's not a problem. And please, when you're going to cite a study, cite it. Because the only study I could find about property values in Washington state was actually to do with how councils are having an easier time after the regulatory change. Probably not what you wanted to cite. And I have yet to find a single study anywhere in the world that tells me that improving the density increases housing values when it's right on top of you. At 1,000 feet, yes, plenty of them. 50 feet, not so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else wish to address council? Seeing none, I will go on to the consent agenda. At this time, well, there's only one item on the consent agenda. And if anyone wishes to remove it from the consent agenda, just you can just make that motion right now. And so just look around the table if anyone wants to remove this from the consent agenda. Not seeing any, I will move. I will ask for someone to move the motion to for approval of the consent agenda. Councillor Ward and Councillor Day. Discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, getting on to new business. First item of new business is the VMP Hydro Works revegetation. Gord Beauvillier, Manager of Parks. Gord, over to you.
Thank you very much. And good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm here to speak to my report tonight. And we're looking for recommendations on the re-greening plan for the VMP Hydro Works site from Carindale down towards Allendale. So we're looking for an endorsement for the plan as well as an endorsement for the fence plan that we propose as well. And that the purchase of the trees come from the city's cash in lieu fund that we get for replacement trees. And all remaining works come from the city's corporate contingency budget. And I'm here to answer any questions on the report.
Okay, I'll open the floor to anyone on council. Councillor Day, please.
Thank you. When we met with the residents and we talked about the issues there, we talked a little bit about the need for fencing. There were several residents who talked about privacy, they talked about noise, and they also talked about safety and security. I'm just a little concerned with the fencing proposal because my vision when we discussed that would be something that would actually attenuate the noise from what is becoming increasingly a busy road. And the trees did used to perform that. And then that doesn't seem to have been one of the considerations in your report. So could you just give us some information as to why a 6-foot chain link fence was the consideration?
So we gave two options of the wood fence, or sorry, thanks for the question through the chair. We gave two options, wood fence plus the chain link fence. Those are the two fences that we, through our research, came up with as far as that was concerned. We only did the fence just past the bus stop. That was the area of most concern, that was most exposed, but we didn't want to do the fencing option is quite expensive. So we thought we would leave that to council to decide if they wanted to carry on that fencing or leave it as where it is right now.
Thank you. For me, it brings up some concerns long-term wise. There are, some people get it, some people don't. who looks after the maintenance. There's other people who've already had to foot the bill for their own fence, for their own privacy. And I think for me, if we're putting up a fence, it has to be a lot of fence to attenuate the noise, and it needs to be the kind of fence that they put up. You know, you see them in the city of Nanaimo next to the big highway. You see them on the road to Victoria next to the big highway, and their purpose is both safety and noise attenuation. So I think if we're, at least for my part, it's important to me that we don't advantage some or disadvantage others, and that we treat everyone fairly, and that we address the issues that were raised. So I do like the planting scheme, and that we would be putting more things back in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Jordison.
Thanks, Gord, for bringing the proposal forward. I just want to, I guess I want to start off with saying that I agree that the process regarding the tree removal along VMP with BC Hydro, it was mishandled and it was poorly communicated by the city. I do support the proposed plan to replant the trees and the vegetation along the berm. However, I can't support any sort of plan to erect a fence along any portion of VMP at the city's expense. And I think the reason I say that is, as residents, I think that we can't expect that we should deal with our own property issues. We can't. And we can expect, I guess, that the properties that adjoin our properties are going to remain unchanged. That's not the world we're living in right now. And I think it's up to every resident, and it's every resident's responsibility to stay informed of developments in neighboring areas and to stay, abreast of those. Erecting a fence is the responsibility of every individual resident, unless I think the city encroaches on private property. And by proceeding with a fence install on certain properties and not others, the city would be, essentially setting a precedent. So I guess I'm just saying that I don't think that on private property we should be fencing anything. And I can tell you that I live across the street on the other side, and there isn't a fence that you can make that is going to eliminate the sound from the highway below. So you bought your property without a fence, and I just think that it's your own responsibility for that portion of it. So I won't be supporting that portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jordison. Councillor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for this. It's very detailed. Help me out just a little bit. We're talking about fencing. It says 50 meters. It doesn't specify a height unless I missed it there, because there's in my mind a difference between a 3-foot fence and a 9-foot fence. Sorry? 6 feet height. Sorry, is that in there and I missed it, or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Day. My bad. I take that back. So 6 feet is better than 3 feet. The other thing is, I'm looking at some of the shrubs and it says 5 gallon, 10 gallon. Forgive me, my eyes gets a little bit tough to read there in the PDF, but was there contemplation, or is there in this plan, like, are some of these trees going to be mature trees at the time of planting? Like, I mean, we could purchase, rather than a fence, like 8-foot hedgerow all the way along there. Was that contemplated, or? You keep turning your mic off. Sorry, Gord, you're off. You turned off. There.
Oh,
That's better.
of course. Yeah, we're gonna use big trees. Like the trees that we've specified this are bigger trees. We're looking at 8 to 10 foot trees. The shrubs are going to be fairly large, but I mean obviously take time to grow in. But the trees, through the plan we did actually ask for purchase bigger trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I see, I mean, largely I'm an area resident too, and I see sort of the houses nearest the intersection there are obviously the most impacted. So, and I see that that's a focus for a lot of the plantings then is that portion.
We did focus a lot of the plantings on that end. And then where there were some other disturbed areas and open areas, we did put the plantings in there as well. And then where we saw some regrowth already, and where there's an abundance of the blackberry, there's mainly just trees along that area to be able to put some of the trees back that were taken away.
Gotcha. And I mean, I guess there's an opportunity here for us as well to yard out a lot of invasives along there. Is that part of this plan?
This plan does not speak to removing the majority of the invasive there. The invasives that we are going to remove are the ones that are kind of coming back within the planting areas. So we'll have to get rid of the smaller regrowth of the blackberry, but we did not put the removal of all the blackberry along the
I mean, it's not our property anyways, I guess, but thank you. I think that's about it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jensen. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. It was a very, very well put together report. I have to echo the sentiment of some of my counterparts with respect to the fence. I'm not in support of a fence, but I absolutely love the idea of the revegetation. I think that over time, as these trees and these plantings, grow, it will provide some absorption of the sound. I think my one concern that I have with some of the new plantings is the invasive species and the blackberries and stuff is it's going to take some maintenance, I would assume, from our parks crew, because new plantings and then getting, you don't want them to get suffocated out by some of the blackberry and whatnot. So how are we going to address, are we actually going to be looking at removing? I feel like it sort of we have to remove the invasive species where the new trees are going to go, or
where we are planting, we will be removing because most of it was already cleared of the invasives, and there's invasives already starting to come back. We'll remove those invasives. There is a lot of blackberry along the VMP. We are not going to remove that blackberry. You're right, there is some maintenance involved in we will probably have to keep track of what's going on there. We're planting at the optimum time to plant, so we'll water if need be. There is a little bit of contingency there for some watering and maybe going in and removing some of the blackberry that comes back. But what we're hoping for is a lot of the native plants, they do grow fast. We're hoping for just a happy planting that flourishes and kind of keeps the invasives out. But you're absolutely right. There is going to be a little bit of maintenance involved there, but we do plan on not doing a lot of maintenance.
yeah. So just a follow-up question here, because some of the PDF is hard to read. It starts to blur out a bit, but the property that's most affected on the corner there, when you look down VMP, there are some properties that are affected and some that aren't as much because they're higher up on the rise. But would we be looking at planting some, like a cluster of the mature trees sort of around those properties that are most affected to provide that privacy?
That's what we did when we did the planting
okay.
plan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Gord, for this. I too I think that we're setting a precedent with a fence bill. I'm not sure what the benefit of it would be. Likewise, if it was a thin fence, if it's sound that we're worried about. I know sight lines until the shrubbery and the trees grow in would certainly help to some degree, but I think it's the property owner's responsibility to build a fence on their property. That's my feeling. So I would support everything you've got going here, except the fence aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair, just a quick question for you. I know that BC Hydro, who bears ultimate responsibility for this, their willingness to, or lack thereof to contribute to this results or stems from the fact that their rules supersede municipal bylaws. You know, if this were a developer, they'd be forced to replan at a 3-to-1 ratio. But they do have a re-greening program that municipalities can apply, a grant program. This year expired end of February, but have we explored with them like an off-cycle grant application, or looking to delay and get a grant application in for next year? I don't like the idea that taxpayers take the hit on something that, frankly, while we can be responsible for, you know, communication issues, this was going to go ahead. This is to power the new museum that the province is building. BC Hydro is a provincial corporation. They did what they did. And I find it hard. There's a couple letters from folks in the community saying, oh, why are we paying for this at the end of the day? So I just wonder if there's anything we can do as a city to recoup any costs should this initiative pass here.
You're correct that that grant process has already passed, so we could put a hold to this for this year and apply for that re-greening grant. It's not a lot of money. It may cover some of the shrubs and that sort of thing, but it's we can definitely do that as well. Yeah,
Appreciate that.
It's there for this type of thing. This was put together for this year to address the planting for this year.
No, great. Appreciate that, Gordon. I guess my question for you, or perhaps for the CIO, is did we approach Hydro? I imagine we did, but to convey the depth of concern around this, understanding it was a project that had to happen, but that, you know, this has caused a significant impact in the community, and are they willing to step forward and contribute? I have lowered expectations, but I'm just curious if we've asked that question.
They have been part of the process right from the beginning. They did attend the first meeting that we had with the residents. I believe that they know the depth of the situation. To my knowledge, there wasn't any money offered, but
That covers it. Thanks.
Your worship, through the
Please.
Councilor Ward,
Yes, sure.
BC Hydro has acknowledged that the window for this particular grant has closed, and while they are making and or made no commitments, they suggested that an application could be walked into the system, and they would do what they could given the situation as it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Earl. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'd like to move option 1, which is the planting plan, and suggest that we also apply for the BC Hydro grant and then add more trees. There's other areas further down VMP that also have written to us and have concerns that they have become more exposed with the loss of some larger trees. And certainly with all of the invasives that are present along VMP, I think that entire area would benefit from, as we are going to try to take out the invasives and put in the planting, we're going to have to be coming back and looking at that, maybe inviting the green team to come and do what they can do to help us, getting our schools involved to see what they can do with their youth to help us as well. And then get BC Hydro involved and get some more plantings in there, because we don't want them right under the hydro lines, but we certainly do want that berm to be vegetated and for it to be as beautiful as it once was.
Thank you very much. So were you making a motion?
A motion of option 1 for the planting plan.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the recommendation. So is that option 1 right now that I'm looking at?
Yes,
Okay.
option 1.
Okay. Yeah, we have the wrong binder. It doesn't have that last statement, and that council fund any remaining works from the city's corporate contingency budget. Is that in that?
It is, yeah.
Oh,
It's the recommendation.
So that's
the
my
only-
question before I would vote on this, because I don't know what that means. And it's a blank check to me, so
Okay.
in my view. So Gord, if you could explain what that means. What does fund any remaining works from the city's corporate contingency budget mean?
If I may,
Yes, please.
the recommendation with option 1, the remaining works are the shrubs and then the equipment. So within the chart that's on page 2 of 3.
Yeah.
That's the remaining works that is to use the corporate contingency.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
got it. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Councillor Day, sorry.
Sorry, I should have, I added to the motion for
Yes.
option 1 that we also apply for the BC Hydro
Correct.
grant.
Can you got that, Marcy, everything? Okay, and Councillor Grove will second that. Discussion on the motion? So it's option 1 with the application, doing the BC Hydro application walk-in. Okay, oh, Councillor Ward, please.
Sorry, just maybe a question through the chair to the CAO or to you, Gord. Just wondering if there's any precedent for this type of scenario where, you know, a public utility has done work in the community, and then as a result, the city has, you know, taken it upon ourselves to either do, you know, frontage works or plantings or anything else. If put you on the spot with that one, but is this precedent setting? Is this something that we've done in the past? I'm a little curious there because I'm sorry to ramble a little bit. I mean, I sympathize, I absolutely do, but you know, I also think that there's a lot of construction and other things that happen in Colwood and things that happen day to day. And, you know, we do this and, you know, well, something happens in another area where some trees are cut down or something happens, are we then obligated to go in there and do the same thing? Are we going to be the, you know, the restoration tree planting service for the community? So, you know, I say that kind of facetiously, but it's a reality. I mean, who's to say that, you know, we're not providing special treatment here? I know, you know, my view was impacted by a building next door. Is the city going to put a privacy screen up for me? So, you know, these are the kind of questions I think we have to ask ourselves. If are we setting a precedent or are we following the precedent? So I'm just curious if you could clarify that.
Mr. Earl?
I'm not sure I'm 100% answering the question. My belief is the re-greening program that BC Hydro has is derivative of their acknowledgement of their impact on right-of-ways, and sometimes replanting cannot occur directly where devegetation has occurred. And as such, the re-greening program was born.
Councillor Ward?
Killed my mic there. Sorry, not in reference to the Hydro's program, Mr. Earl, but I'm wondering, has the city of Colwood ourselves reached into our pockets and done something like this previously that we're aware of?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Marcy, could you please put the motion up on, or does everyone know what the motion is? Okay. You can always clear to what you're voting on here. In the meantime, Councillor Olson has one quick question.
I just have a quick question. Perhaps you can answer it, Mr. Earl. The re-greening program through BC Hydro, can you apply for that grant multiple times? Like the city, in the event that they come in another area, take out a bunch of trees next year, can you apply for that grant again? Is there a limit?
I don't believe there's a limit. We can
Okay.
certainly have that communication
Just
with
curious.
BC Hydro. As
Yeah.
described before, they're keenly aware of that the community of Colwood is feeling this particular intrusion. And so I think they are desirous to help.
Okay, thank you.
While we're waiting, Councillor Jordison has another question.
I don't really have, it's just a thought. I guess because VMP is going to be widened, we probably would have been in the situation regardless of whether the power lines are going in or not. So I think in that respect that I think that it's not as big of a precedent, because I think we would have been in this sort of same situation, widening the road anyway. So just a thought.
Counselor Day, you want to speak again? I see. That's your last time.
I just thought I'd offer while we were waiting, I'm just for my motion, option 1 is on the bottom of page 2 and it describes the exact amount. It's $58,100. And it describes exactly what all the amounts are. So it's $37,000 worth of trees, almost $7,000 worth of shrubs, and then $9,400 for labor and $4,600 for equipment, which comes from the corporate contingency. And it's all okay. Don't stop that.
So just a clarification, Counselor Day. So you're proposing that we don't start until we get an answer on the grant funding, correct? So there's an upside to this, right? Is that what you're suggesting here? Okay. Okay, I'll call the question right now. All those in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? So let it be shown that Councillor Ward and Mayor Kobayashi opposed. Thank you very much, Gord. Okay, next item is the municipal or the second BC electric vehicle charging hub. Carolyn.
Oh, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time this evening on this agenda item. I'm going to give you a bit of a brief overview of this second EV charging hub proposal, and I'm also joined by other staff who we've been working together with partners on this proposal. Just to frame in context quickly, as we all are probably aware, our mobility or transportation emissions are a significant aspect of climate mitigation that we need to address. So with around 57% of our Colwood emissions related to mobility, we've committed in the Climate Action Plan to prioritizing the transition to electric mobility as one of those measures to address that and to meet our net zero emissions target. We've been working together with regional and provincial partners to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles or EVs, and amongst those actions are expanding EV charging infrastructure. We know that coming our way very quickly are the provincial requirements for EV sales to be 90% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. So these are all important steps we're taking in light of these things. In February, Council directed staff to prioritize exploring further opportunities with BC Hydro to install more EV charging infrastructure. And at that meeting was also passed new charging hub, which is the first big regional BC Hydro charging hub at the Park and Ride at Ocean Park Boulevard. So this proposed second hub is at Quarry Park and the community center site. The proposal is for up to 20 ports with a phase 1 for 4 fast chargers and 4 level 2 chargers. And the location you can see circled there right in the center area, very close to the community center and accessible, easily accessible for the public. This is an updated draft concept from what you have in your report. Just as staff and BC Hydro and developer have been working on the concept, you'll see in the blue area, there's an accessible charging hub. So an accessible parking spot and improvement to the visual layout for the kiosks and equipment. So the proposal is for a license of occupation with BC Hydro that would be the same as the city entered for the Park and Ride, where they would cover all the installation and maintenance, the lighting and signage, and Colwood would do our standard parking lot maintenance as our part. And so they recommended the staff recommendation is for this second charging hub in line with the agreement made previously. And staff are really happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Questions from council? Councillor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Worship. This is great. I'm all for this. I have no issue whatsoever. I guess the only question that comes to my mind is, what does this do, or is there an impact on parking in general? Are we repurposing a bunch of spots? Or are we adding to the existing parking? I mean, I know it's still in the development phase, but I guess my point is, are we taking up some park space to build this, to make sure we keep our parking numbers? Or have we done those calculations yet, or any insight whatsoever would be appreciated?
The proposed areas for charging would be within the existing proposed parking area, so it wouldn't be adding to that and reducing any park area. And as we can see, the need for EV parking is going to be increasing. So there hasn't been any concerns identified by the folks looking at the whole project layout.
I get it. So we're repurposing some planned existing parking to EV only. I guess the only flip side to that is that means we're excluding some people from parking in certain spots as well, if you don't have an EV.
Yeah.
Your Worship, if I could maybe join in on this answer to Councillor Jansen. So we have been looking at the overall parking needs of this potentially expanded Quarry Park. There's been recent work with the Cablecraft folks looking at increasing parking along, I think it's Quarry. We've got the names on the map a bit mixed up, but we increased the parking that's available on the street by turning it to 45-degree parking. So at this point, we're not concerned with overall parking supply. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. And I think it really excited me to see your standards for an accessible EV charging spot, especially since this is Accessibility Week. And I just thought that was pretty exciting because people of all ages and all abilities will want and need to use EV charging. So thank you so much for thinking of that and putting it in our plan.
Thanks, Councillor Day. Councillor Jordison.
Thanks. I know we're not there yet, but how does this how does this work with the transit-oriented areas eligible for reduced parking requirements with our lovely bills that are coming forward tonight, especially in this area?
Thank you for that question through the mayor. So Matt reminded me that overall, we feel we've got a surplus of parking on this overall park plan that's being compiled right now. We're talking about parking that would be needed to service the public amenities. We're not talking about necessarily private parking that would be affected by the Bill 47 changes, which we can get into in more detail later this evening.
Councillor Ward?
Just a quick question, maybe educational one for me is why would we want to install anything other than the fastest available charger? And I just wonder, are you not encouraging vehicles to just sit longer because it takes longer? I just went on a road trip down to Portland with some friends, and as great as it was to go in an electric car and save a lot of money, the stopping time was incredible versus my fossil fuel powered vehicle. So, and I think if you're charging for the time, you can turn people over. And I think in all seriousness, as we move towards more electric vehicles, charging, if you're not charging at your home, becomes an issue. Gas stations don't exist per se. So people seek out the fast chargers at parks and big box stores and places where you find them now. So why bother with the slow ones, I guess is the question. They just seem like they're going to be redundant. It's like buying a computer that's 2 years old already. I just wonder why it makes sense.
Through the chair. I may have some other colleagues who might want to add to this, and I can certainly bring back some more information from BC Hydro because they've done a lot of work on figuring out what is needed and studying how best to meet the public needs on this. But some of my basic understandings of it from what they've told us is, they have folks that may need to use charging for as they go into a meeting, say, or other things that maybe they go to the community center and they go into a class. If they are only able to sit there and charge for 30 minutes for the fast charger, that might, become an issue for them, that they have to move it quickly. But also there are some folks are looking at fast charging for a specific amount of time and then maybe doing the last 20% on a slower charger. And I could see, do you have anything to add to that?
Through the chair. Thank you, Carolyn. I think you basically covered it, but essentially looking at the site uses, people might come there for a soccer game and need to park for a couple of hours so they can get both things done at the same time. And so the idea is that there will be various needs in terms of length of charging, length of stay, and the two options balance both that way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Olson.
Just want to make a comment in response to Councillor Ward, is that I just took my electric car to Seattle, and the convenience of the fast charger for when you're traveling like off a main highway, right? It's different. So I think that people going to this area are not necessarily looking specifically to charge for 25 minutes. They're going to parks or shopping or dining in a restaurant, right? So just wanted to make that point there.
Fair enough. I have a couple questions myself and a comment. I want to compliment you because I had to endure 4.5 hour CRD meeting discussing the CRD plan here and the ones that they control. I never did get this question answered, but they did give us kudos for the first state, for the park and ride. They actually identified us in the report, which is great news. And now we got a second one. How are we doing this? And it took the CRD such a long time to roll it out. I mean, nuts. I mean, are we getting any CRD stations ourselves in Colwood to the best of your knowledge? Because I couldn't get that question answered. They said they were going to send it to me, but I still haven't received it.
Thanks for the question. We brought forward to council recently or I'm just trying to think if we, I might be forgetting my timeline, but the charging station in Parks, I believe, has already come forward, has it not? Or maybe that's, no, yeah, it did go through, didn't it? Yes. So CRD has done provided is working on our behalf they've got a grant for EV charging, public EV charging, and that was made a while back for Colwood to put 8 charging stations in parks. So we are receiving those through the CRD. They have a staff person who helps coordinate charging infrastructure and other electric mobility transitions. And she's been super helpful for us as we work on our fleet, on our public charging infrastructure and all sorts of things. So the CRD is also helping us with some of these partnership opportunities with BC Hydro and other grants and whatnot. So I'm feeling very supported there.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. I'm just amazed at how quickly you guys are moving right now. And, you're getting results that are below the CRD over, because the CRD is administering those ones. And whereas this is hands off for us, BC Hydro looks after it and it's not our responsibility. We walk away from it. So kind of like that. Last question I do have right now. We had passed in council a couple months ago about rates, charging, now starting to charge for our EV stations right now. Is that now implemented now, or when is that going to be implemented?
For the chair, thank you. Yes, it has been implemented, I believe, for about 5 weeks now. So
Really?
yes, thank you.
No wonder Councillor Grove doesn't park his car out there anymore. Councillor Grove, you got a rebuttal.
At least I have an electric car. I would move this recommendation.
Great, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Olson. Discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Great job, everyone. Next item is the municipal security issuing resolution for the loan authorization. That's bylaw 2015. Our sidewalks project. Jen, do you have anything to add on this?
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. Bylaw 2015 was adopted by council last month. This really is specific direction that we are looking for the fall 2024 issue through the CRD, and that we do require that the CRD include this borrow in their security issuing bylaw.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion then, please? Councillor Jensen, Councillor Grove, discussion? Seeing none, any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. And we move on to Bill 44 and 47 bylaw amendments. Over to Matt Blakely, our senior planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So before we get into the details, I just want to highlight that through the insightful decisions regarding housing policy made by Colwood's Council, in the past, the city was extremely well positioned with regards to responding to legislative bills 44 and 47. So as we'll highlight in the forthcoming presentation, council's foresight into the city's housing needs and decision to permit flexible housing options in Colwood's neighborhoods made aligning with the provincial mandates less onerous than staff had initially anticipated when the legislation was first introduced. So thank you personally for that. So I'd also just, before we get started with the presentation here, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the consulting team from Modus Planning, Design and Engagement for their hard work and support on the Bills 44 and 47 project. With a special thanks to Jeanette Elmore, who was the project lead for Modus, for all of her guidance and dedication over the last couple months. And finally, I'd like to thank the city's development services team for all their support and input throughout the project. So on that note, I'd like to reintroduce to Council Jeanette Elmore, Senior Planner with Modus, who will be giving a presentation on the Bill 44 and 47 project and associated bylaw amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Jeanette.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. Thank you for such a kind and warm welcome tonight. Thank you for having me. As Mr. Blakely presented, my name is Jeanette Elmore. I am a senior planner with Modus Planning and Engagement out of Vancouver, and we've been working very closely with staff over the past few months towards an approach to meeting Bill 44 and 47. As we have previously discussed, and we're hearing much in the news, in late 2023, the province introduced several changes to the Local Government Act with the goal of increasing housing supply, creating more diverse housing choices, and over time, improving housing affordability. The recommended bylaw amendments being presented today respond to Bills 44 and Bills 47. And these responses are required to be adopted by city councils by June 30th across the province. Am I getting a presentation here?
No,
Apologies.
they're
Sorry.
working on it right now. Sorry, you can just hold off the Jeanette.
I guess I jumped the gun a little bit there.
There you go. We can see it now.
Thank you. I'm ready for the next slide. So as we've previously discussed, the City of Colwood is required to amend its bylaws by June 30th in order to reflect Bill 44, the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act, and Bill 47, the Transit Oriented Areas Act. And as Mr. Blakely previously alluded, because of council's foresight in the past in responding to housing needs across the city of Colwood is farther ahead and already welcomes much of the type of housing that is envisioned through both Bill 44 and Bill 47. And as a result, the bylaw amendments are much less substantial than we are seeing in municipalities across BC. The city is also investigating the potential to apply the new authorities under Bill 46, which is the development finance tools. This is being completed under a separate but related project. Next page, thank you. So the province gave royal assent to Bill 44 in December 2023. The bill identifies restricted zones as single-family and duplex residential zones, but single-family with a secondary suite or an ADU, and duplex zones with where each duplex unit has no more than one secondary suite. And on these restricted zones, the minimum provincial densities apply depending on lot size and location. So for parcels that are 280 square meters or smaller, the province requires a minimum density of 3 units be reflected by zoning. And for parcels that are greater than 280 square meters, then it's 4 units minimum. And where these parcels are located within 400 meters of a defined frequent bus service stop, then 6 units would be the minimum permitted density. So to clarify, these are not the minimum densities that must be constructed. These are rather minimum densities that must be permitted by a local government through zoning. So a landowner or a developer could choose to develop fewer than the minimum required. In all other cases, lot sizes that don't meet these parameters of size or geographic location, the province mandates a minimum of 1 detached dwelling and a secondary suite and or a carriage home or ADU. And there are several situations where a parcel might be exempted from the requirement for 3 to 6 units. But again, because City of Colwood is ahead of the curve, we don't really need to get into those special situations unless there's particular interest. One of the other tools or abilities that local governments has is that they can determine what type of housing meets that minimum density requirement. So the required minimum densities may include a combination of secondary suites, garden suites, carriage homes, houseplexes, or row houses. Next slide, thank you. Again, as we have mentioned, owing to the city's existing provisions for secondary suites and ADUs in all single detached and duplex zones, none of the city's residential zones are legally defined as restricted under Bill 44. As a result, staff are recommending minor amendments to the land use bylaw in order to clarify and align the density provisions within R6 and CD18 zones with the minimum Bill 44 requirements. And this is more of a housekeeping amendment to bring those zones in line with the other zones in the land use bylaw. Through this exercise, we have identified opportunities to improve future infill policies and regulations in the city, and this can be explored as part of the future OCP update. An exploration of future infill approaches could include identifying suitable areas in the city, as well as a particular location and scale of infill housing. And alongside that, a review of the city's existing development permit guidelines for intensive residential and for multifamily use. And finally, this exploration could include the incorporation of the Triangle Lands and Gateway Action Plan that was completed in 2021. And the map that we're showing on screen here highlights in yellow the areas that are likely available and available for future infill and may be subject to further analysis. Under our review of Bill 44 provisions, these are the parcels that were highlighted as being subject to Bill 44. But as the city continues to investigate these opportunities, this land or this map might be refined through the process. Next slide, please. Moving on to Bill 44, which has minimal impacts on Colwood's land use framework at this point in time. The minimum density provisions and parking reduction requirements of the Bill 47, the Transit-Oriented Areas Bill, must also be adopted by June 30th. The province has designated the Colwood Bus Exchange as one of these TOAs, and has required that the land around the bus exchange be designated with the corresponding density framework. The province has noted the Colwood Bus Exchange as having a Tier 4 and a Tier 5 density framework. The first is within 200 meters of the bus exchange, a 10-story minimum and a 3.5 FAR floor area ratio would be the minimum permitted densities for zoning. And within 200 to 400 meters of the exchange, then a slightly lower minimum density would be mandated, and that's a 6-story or 2.5 FAR. Now, it's important to note that alongside these minimum densities, that local governments may not prescribe a minimum number of residential parking spaces. We know that parking continues to be in high demand, but has impacts in terms of affordability and land use and equity. And the province is requiring that local governments remove any requirement for residential parking within TOAs in order to meet these objectives. However, local governments or developers are still free to provide as much parking as they feel is needed. And the city can also set design standards, including standards for EV charging. And local governments can also set the requirements for the number of accessible and non-residential parking spaces within the TOA. We've overlaid here the TOA radius, the Tier 4 and Tier 5 radii over the land use plan showing on aerial. When thoughtfully planned, transit-oriented areas can make highly efficient use of land and infrastructure. They can provide a range of community benefits, including a diversity of housing options, access to amenities and services, and they support local businesses and employment opportunities. The City of Colwood has already initiated this type of planning approach through the Gateway and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan. So here's another example where the City of Colwood has already envisioned greater densities than is being mandated by the province and is in the process of reflecting this type of thinking into the OCP, where again, higher densities are already generally envisioned. Next slide. Thank you. So in terms of recommendations for bylaw amendments that are being presented tonight, the first is simply to designate the transit-oriented area on Figure 8, the land use map in the OCP. You can see it in the top right corner over Colwood Corners. Next slide. And then secondly, the recommendation is to add a brief description within the OCP under Section 7 in land use to describe what those densities are and what that mandate is from the province. So in accordance with provincial legislation, municipalities must designate land near rapid transit stations and major bus exchanges as transit-oriented areas. The Colwood Exchange has been identified as a TOA with the following prescribed allowances. Tier 4 allows for up to 10 stories and 3.5 floor area ratio within 200 meters of the Colwood Bus Exchange. And second, Tier 5 allows up to 6 stories or 2.5 FAR within 400 meters of the Colwood Bus Exchange. And finally, the last bullet point is that residential parking minimums be eliminated within 400 meters of the Colwood Exchange area. Next slide, thank you. Alongside the amendment to the OCP to designate the TOA, amendments are proposed to the off-street parking bylaw to update Figure 1 to remove residential parking requirements within the TOA, shown in the map attached here. Additional minor amendments are proposed as listed in the report to council. And this includes amendments to ensure requirements for universal parking remain in place even once residential parking minimums are removed. Now, Modus has supported staff in public and stakeholder outreach and engagement throughout this process, including several significant actions. The first was identifying stakeholders and key messages through an engagement and communication strategy. The second was presenting approaches and significant dates on the city's Let's Talk page. We also presented the approaches to the public and stakeholders at the Ideas Fair through the presentation of 5 informational panels where there were 3 Modus staff on hand, and also the staff project team was circulating and available to discuss the approach and project with community members. Finally, there is an ongoing public and stakeholder survey that is available on the website. It was launched in late April and is still ongoing. Because of the mandatory nature of the provincial legislation, the primary purpose of the engagement was to inform community members about the changes, and also to give stakeholders an opportunity to inform the implementation approach and also to help inform out on the future 2024 OCP and land use bylaw update. The primary objectives for the engagement were to inform out on the provincial bills and also to consult on aspects of implementation, including getting members of the public's vision, their hopes, their concerns, as well as their priorities and level of support for the infill housing and TOA areas. Next page. In our conversations at the Ideas Fair, we did hear overall support for the housing as well, or the housing approaches, as well as concern over the ongoing housing crisis. We heard overall general support for the current direction that the city is taking towards transit-oriented areas and infill housing. Over the course of the consultation event, Modus staff, as well as City of Colwood project staff, had a number of conversations. We did hear some concerns and reservations about the implementation of greater density, including the infill approach and TOA legislation. We heard concern and reservations about building form, neighborhood design, the capacity of infrastructure, parking, traffic impacts, impacts to the environment, as well as concerns about the lack of a clear approach for affordable housing in the city and the effectiveness of primarily Bill 44 to actually create more infill housing in the city. We also heard suggestions and comments on how to improve housing affordability, requests for greater community amenities and concerns that might be out of balance as the city grows. We heard comments about tree preservation, green space development, parking regulations, and a number of sustainable solutions to densifying. Lessons learned through the public consultation will help to inform the next steps of updating the OCP and land use bylaw. These include investigating opportunities to improve the existing infill housing policies and regulations, reviewing and updating the intensive residential development permit guidelines, and incorporating the City of Colwood's Triangle Lands and Gateway Action Plan into the OCP. In addition to the mandatory requirements of the mandatory density requirements of Bill 44, there are also a number of proactive planning requirements within Bill 44. These require all local governments to update their housing needs reports using a standardized methodology and a 20-year time horizon. And that interim report is required to be completed by January 1st, 2025. Then the province also requires that local governments update and align their official community plans and their zoning bylaws, in the City of Colwood's case, the land use bylaw, with the housing needs in order to meet the projected housing needs. And those deadlines are for December 31st, 2025. That's all I have for the presentation today. Thank you very much for your time. I remain available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a great presentation, Jeanette. So I will hand it over to council for questions. I don't think we have a lot of choice here, which is the funny thing about this thing. It's being mandated by the province, obviously, and we're complying. So I must admit, I'd like to make this comment right now, though. You're giving us too much credit as a council. The staff had the foresight, I believe, anyways. They were trying to guide us in a certain direction, and so I'd like to thank staff, the planning development sides. You had a crystal ball and you saw something way back when. I know I discussed this on the previous council. So, and so I think it made this whole amendment process a lot easier. So a lot of foresight by staff. And I just want to thank the staff for this because you made it a lot easier. That's for sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Earl. And Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. This is great. I don't have a lot of questions. And the only thing that occurred to me was in that transit area, or 200 and 400 meters, where we lose the ability to regulate parking amounts or parking numbers. I don't see anything in here. There's stuff about accessible parking spots, but can you speak, Matt, at all to things like commercial parking or commercial access, or garbage truck access, or also things like do we have the ability to regulate some EV spots, that kind of idea?
Yeah, through the mayor. Thanks for that question. Yeah, so pretty much anything other than residential parking, we can still create regulations for. So that's certainly something that we would look into, especially for EV parking, loading, commercial parking, things like that. We would definitely incorporate that.
Food delivery seems to be, they're everywhere. But do you see that as an area where we need to apply some thought? Or is there an opening
It's-
there?
I think our current regulations are pretty strong, but it's certainly something, as we move forward, looking at incorporating the Gateway and Triangle Lands Plan into the OCP. It's something that we can explore further to make sure that we are meeting those needs. Also, while I have the mic, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I also have a short presentation about some of the housekeeping amendments that are not aligned with the provincial legislation that are a part of this. It's outlined in the report, but I know we want to move forward here, so I'll try to go through them as quick as possible.
Go ahead, please.
Unless anybody has any other quick questions, but well, we can save questions for after too, if that works. Okay. So these are, as I mentioned, housekeeping amendments to the off-street parking regulations bylaw. So these amendments are recommended by staff to address concerns identified by the development community. So I'll just quickly go through the proposed amendments and briefly touch on the rationale. Just so council's aware, table 4 in the staff report also provides a more detailed rationale for the amendments. So the first one, as you can see on the screen, is a proposed amendment to delete the word column from section 3.6.3 and add the following text other than a column in a structured parking facility in the first paragraph of the same section. So essentially what this does is, as you can see in the image on the left, the yellow spaces near the gray columns, that's currently the buffer space that we require. It adds another foot to the parking space. And it's a significant once you're doing a parkade, once you have a stretch of parking spaces and number of columns, it significantly adds to the amount of space required for parking facilities. And as a result, a significant increase in the cost to provide parking, especially when it's underground. There has been a number of variances that have been approved by council speaking directly to this item. So staff are proposing that we amend the bylaw to remove that buffer requirement. One thing to note is that we're just removing the word column because it's important to have those buffers around walls and other obstructions. So it's just with columns. You can go to so the next proposed amendment is to section 3.6, table 3. So that's to replace the aisle width. So that's the maneuvering aisle from 7.6 meters to 7 meters for 90-degree parking. So this change would align Colwood with neighboring municipalities, kind of keeping up with best practices. And it's still above the minimum engineering standards, while reducing, again, the overall space needed for a parking facility. Proposed amendment to table 5, section 5.1, to replace the requirement for attached housing for six short-term bicycle parking spaces per building is the current one, and we're wanting to switch that to 6 spaces per lot. The rationale for this is there's many developments in the city of Colwood that have multiple attached buildings on one lot. So this creates a situation where you need to have 80 short-term bicycle parking spaces, which is not the intent of this regulation. So it's just amending it to meet the intent of having 6 spaces per lot. And then finally, since the publishing of the draft amending bylaw, staff noted one additional amendment to table 3 to accurately reflect the total module width, which represents the total width of the space required to encompass 2 sets of parking stalls divided by a drive aisle. So as we are proposing to reduce the drive aisle, the total module width should also be reduced. So therefore, staff are also recommending that the total module under the row 90-degree parking angle be changed from 19.2 meters to 18.6 meters, and that this be included in the amending bylaw, and that council give bylaw 1909-1 first reading as amended. So in conclusion, I just want to remind council that these amendments I just spoke to are separate from the Bill 44 and 47 legislation and are therefore not required to meet the legislative mandates. And with that, Jeanette and I are happy to answer any questions about what we've presented on here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Day?
Thank you. So I'm really pleased to see the accessible parking addressed in spite of the bills that are coming forward. That's really important. We still, as far as I know, do not have a plan for access and accessibility. In previous iterations of parking lot designs, we simply would look and say, yes, X number of stalls have been provided, but we're still have not been able to be looking at how accessible those places are. So curb cuts and distance from doorways, availability of elevators, all those kinds of issues remain very problematic for people with physical disabilities. And there's also the issue of parking for transit type uses like Handy Dart, couriers, Handy Dart, Amazon, Loomis, all of your delivery services. Currently, the most common thing I see is them pulled up on the sidewalk or across the bike lane, blocking paths. When I regularly drive through Langford, the garbage trucks are completely blocking the road. And they're there for quite a while. They're emptying out an apartment building. They've got a big truck where they're putting, I don't know, 50, 60 garbage cans into a big covered truck. And they're simply stopping in the middle of the road. I think we need to do some better planning than that. And I realize that we're not addressing those issues here tonight, but we're making some big swings and big changes mandated by the province. And there's just a whole lot of issues that we heard at our ideas fair are a concern. Housing first, environmental protection, crickets. Trees and green space, also crickets. And I realize that we can't solve that. We have to go with the flow here. But at the same time, those are real issues and they're going to come back and be something that we have to deal with. So I just point those out and hope that maybe there might be some good answers forthcoming in terms of how we can look at how neighborhoods operate and what their needs are, just as a community, not because I want to require a builder to pay for the amenities, but I think on our roadways, whether we provide parking on the side of the road or a loading zone or other types of designations so that there's a place for that, because the normal everyday things should be thought of in advance.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I'll just add that I don't want to speak for my engineering colleagues, but there is a transportation master plan that's being developed that will probably look into a lot of the items that you brought up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you, Matt. I think, you, like so many folks in the municipal realm, were handed this massive project with a pretty tight deadline. So, I commend you for putting together what you have, and the rest of the team for the work that's gone into this. And I echo the mayor's comments that I think there's an element of the sort of, when we heard about Bill 44 and 47, just, province wide, there was this chicken little, the sky is falling, a lot of concerns from a lot of people, myself included. And I think, as the mayor said, staff have well prepared Colwood, and I think we're in a unique position. We have a lot of development that happens in places like gravel pits that, you know, we aren't losing tree cover in those areas, and density isn't an issue. The triangle lands were well underway. So I give full credit to staff and even to previous councils for laying the groundwork that smooths the ride, I think, for us in many ways. And, you know, we did some of that work here with the ADUs and opening up residential properties. So I don't think we're going to see the same impact that that some feel that we will. You know, that being said, I think around the housing target lists and things, I think there's a lot of performative politics that goes into that. And, you know, there's an election coming. So I'd like to see more carrot and less stick from this government, but it is what it is. And then I think, you know, as I go back to what I originally said, I commend you for the work that's been done. I actually did, I'm glad you touched on, I wanted to touch on the sort of housekeeping amendments. That was really interesting to me. So I reached out and spoke to two developers with projects ongoing in Colwood, and both of them used almost the same language independently of each other to call it kind of the $1 million issue. By bringing particularly the first two issues, the columns and the width piece into really what is best practices around the region. On a standard 6-story project, we're talking $1 million. And this was a very real cost to the development community that, you know, we've kind of artificially foisted on them, not maliciously, but, you know, as a result of the policy that's there. So by this quick sort of little amendment, you know, we build some goodwill with our development partners, and they are stakeholders in our community. So I think it's a real win. You know, there's give and take, and we ask a lot of them. And I think, you know, this is our opportunity to do something that really just brings us into alignment with everybody else and hands back $1 million. And so we can feel less guilty when we ask for a few $100,000 worth of something here and there. So thank you for the, you know, for the foresight to include that in there as well. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's I don't see no other questions. There is a recommendation in the agenda. Anybody wish to make the recommendation, please? Okay, Councillor Grove, seconder. Councillor Jensen, discussion. Seeing none, any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt. Great job. Okay, on to bylaws. If you could read the bylaws, please, Marcy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have bylaw number 1700-12, official community plan, transit-oriented areas designation for first, second, and third readings.
Could I get the motion, please? Okay. Councillor Georges, no, I didn't see it. Councillor Grove, pardon me, and Councillor Olson. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next.
Bylaw number 2026, land use bylaw amendment number 213, infill housing for first, second, and third reading.
Motion, Councillor Olson, Councillor Ward, seconds. Discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? Okay, Councillor Day opposes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Bylaw 1909-1, off-street parking regulations for transit-oriented areas designation. First reading is amended.
Okay, Councillor Georgeson, second. Councillor Jensen, discussion. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
So the same bylaw number 1909-1, off-street parking regulations for transit-oriented areas designation for second and third readings.
Okay, motion, Councillor Georgeson, Councillor Olson, discussion, seeing none, motion carries. And motion for adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor Olson, Councillor Ward, you opposed, carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to go back into, we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's meet back here at 8 for finishing camera.